Surely you remember this non-running GL 1000 I picked up for $600 last year. I've made a lot of progress with it. I got it running. I replaced the timing belts. Oh, look at all that room we have now. I found the original 1975 carbs and rebuilt them. A lot of little cosmetic fixes. And in this video, we're gonna be working on cleaning out the gas tank, installing and tuning the carbs, and throwing some new tires on it. Let's go fix a bike. I want to get the gas tank out so I can throw some vinegar in there and start treating it and cleaning it. So that needs to come out. And for the gas tank to come out, all of this needed to come out. The wheel needs to come off too, and then it should slip under the rear subframe so I can have access to the tank. Gas looked terrible in this, but the inside doesn't look too bad. There were a lot of rust chunks that came out of it, but it doesn't leak. So I really think there's some life in here and worth trying to save it for now. Just gonna pour a bunch of vinegar in here and let it sit for a little bit. Try to clean out the tank as much as I can. Also replacing the old fuel pump since it wasn't pushing out fuel. I suspect the diaphragm was busted. I couldn't get it apart because all these screws were stripped. So I found a good one off of GL 1100. Should be just fine. So gas tank's back in. Cleaned out the vinegar and then threw some ATF fluid in there just so it wouldn't flash rust. Got new fuel hose to the used but working mechanical fuel pump, and then I got an inline filter in there, and then back out over here. And we're just gonna turn it over and see if we can get fuel coming out of here. Cool, so we know the fuel pump is now working. What I did find out though is the reserve tube is clogged. And if you know anything about these tanks, the way they were designed is there's two metal tubes running from the Petcock down to two screens. One at a normal level and then the reserve is much lower. So that gas tank is not going to work. If I didn't care about not having a reserve, it would be fine. But I want a reserve. I want my things to work as they should. So all the used parts I've been getting for this have been from one donor bike. It's from a guy, Matt. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Matt because he's been parting out his GL. I met him through one of the GL Facebook pages, giving a chance for his bike to live on through this bike and getting this bike back on the road. Got around to putting a new tire on the rear wheel. I decided to use the Bridgestone Battle Axe BT46s. Huge shout out to RevZilla and their price match options. The rears are 130 by 90 by 17 and the fronts are 190 by 19. This is Sean telling the camera how excited he is that he is finally pulling out the one carb conversion, but he forgot to turn the mic on. I'll probably throw this on eBay, so if you're interested, let's make a deal. Overdue for some new spark plugs. Old ones out, new ones in. One of the parts Matt sent along with the gas tank was the newer style Petcock. Note the screws instead of the rivets, making rebuilding them way easier. So that's what I did. Don't forget the O-rings on the back. And the last thing I did was replace all the vacuum lines on the rebuilt carburetor. And I did it one-handed. All right, one side in. This looks so much better than the single carb conversion. Got the fuel lines already running in here. I'm gonna go on the other side. And still got to hook up the intake manifolds to here. And then I got to run my new cables, push and a pull cable to the linkage down here, because before the guy was only running one cable down to the single carb. So this will go about right there, something like that from the inside. Come down here. Okay, got these on. Carbs are in. Choke is connected. I have the main throttle connected, but I don't think I have it routed correctly because it's sticking out here. This is the push. I'll have to figure that out. When I got it in, it wasn't pulling the throttle back. It was just binding. So I got to figure out the right routing for all this. But I think everything is connected enough to throw some gas in there and see if we can get this running on the original carbs. I didn't put too much gas in it, so I put it on reserve. So hopefully my reserve is working now. Even without the push, it kind of snaps back a little bit. But like I was saying, when I had the other cable in there, you would pull it on throttle and let go and it would stay. So something was bound up, but at least now it's kind of returning. All right, anyway, let's see if we can get this started. Let's throw the choke on. Woo! Got something there. It'll only run with the start button engaged. Alright, let's figure this out. It was only running with the starter pressed in. As soon as I let go, even with the throttle open, closed, it didn't matter, it shut down, which kind of tells me it was ignition related, right? So I was looking through here, checking my grounds, my coils, and this main plug came undone. Probably when I was messing with all of this. So I'm going to shove that back in there, make sure that's plugged in tight, and let's try that again. Okay. Plugged in, choke is down because it's probably warm enough. Alright. Let's adjust the idle, because that was revving to 3,000. But yeah, man, I spent about 2 months on those carbs. Everything just kept breaking inside of them, and I had to replace them. That's really promising. It was a nightmare to put all this back in, only to find out something in the carb was not done right.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
To hear it idle like that, that's really happy to hear. Let's adjust that idle and see if we can bring it down a little bit. It is backed out all the way, so we got to figure out if we have a vacuum leak somewhere, and again, I haven't even synchronized these carbs yet, so that could be an issue. All right, so I was messing around. I didn't find any air leaks, but you know, after rebuilding these carbs, you have to sync them, and they're not synced. And just messing around with the adjustments for the syncs, I was able to lower the idle quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and order the parts, the special tool I need to get a vacuum line in these ports and sync them up, and then we'll go from there. But glad it's running on the original carbs again. Well, look what I just found, some Honda carb sync tools. So we're going to throw those in there, and we can do that right now. We got this should work right here. Spoke too soon about the carbs. Came back today to find that vacuum leak, what I assume is a vacuum leak for why it's running at 3,000 RPMs, and it was running differently. And I looked down at the carbs, and fuel was pooling in the intake here. And I noticed it coming from cylinder 2, or carb 2. It was pouring in this way. So I'm going to take this apart, check the float levels again, and see if there's anything that's standing out to me as why fuel would be pouring in. I found some suspect parts, I ordered replacements, and removed the front wheel in the meantime. So I don't know how many days are encompassed in this one video. If you count me rebuilding the carburetor, it's probably been a couple months at least. I didn't want to release this video until I can ride the Goldwing. So I got my camera girl here today. I got a box of parts. I got a new tire on this wheel. It's looking promising, but hopefully this is at the very end of the video and not halfway through a 50-minute video. Huh. Oh, no. Let's get to work. Okay, that's probably good. So we got the new tire. we're going to put the wheel on. The right side front brake caliper was toast. The bleeder screw snapped off. I tried to extract it, not going to happen. So I already bought a used one, waiting on that. I also bought rebuild kits for both calipers. The rear one does work, so best case scenario, we get this wheel on. I'll still try to ride it with the back brake, that's not a problem. The big issue that I'm worried about is the fuel flooding out of that one carb into the intake plenum. We got to figure out what's going on with that. I bought a new float and a new float needle, because I think my needle is broken and it's not sealing correctly, and I think that's why the gas just keeps coming in. And I just got a bunch of little parts, like a 7-volt regulator I'm going to put in and see if that fixes my fuel gauge and my coolant gauge, because those don't work at the moment. And some fuel line hoses and stuff like that. But let's see how far we can get today on this. Alright, so I just took this off. And I thought this was just like a universal black fender someone put on and painted, but this is factory painted. Let me know did the newer Goldwings come with a black fender or colored fenders? I'm not sure. I have to look that up. I know that this model specifically came with a chrome fender, so this is going back chrome. Usually I'm not a big chrome guy, but if it's a factory option, it's going to go back on, especially on this 75, which will hopefully be a good example one day. Chelsea's got the quick glow. She's polishing up this fender. It's not even really that bad, but this stuff is amazing. It will get all the rust out of your chrome and fill the pitting. So that will look brand new, I'm sure of it. And while she's doing that, I'm going to take that carb apart again and do some fuel stuff with that. What do you think about that?
Sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. So I got all my parts from goldwingparts.com. They've been great. Shout out to them. So when I took this apart last time I was in here, because of the flooding, I pulled apart the float and the needle jet. And I went ahead and ordered a new float and a new needle jet because the float adjustment was out of whack and I couldn't bend it back to how it was from the factory, so I just ordered a new one to not have to deal with that. I couldn't get it in spec. It's a 21 millimeter spec between the top of the float and the seal of the carb. The reason it was flooding out into the intake plenum is this. This is the new one on my right, and this is the old one on my left. See how the one on the left is rounded? The way these work is they're attached to the float. And when the carb fills up with gas, the float rises and presses this up into the seals. And what's happening is the one on my left, the old one, isn't making that complete seal. Look at that huge difference. And the one on my left has a hole in the top. So the top has eroded enough. I'm not sure how that happened, or just, old rubber. So now, this is the old set here. We're going to put the new set in and see if you can see in here. This is where it seats. That little tiny hole in there, that's what this closes, and that stops the fuel from coming into the carb. It'll sit like this. So even if this fixes the flooding issue, we still have the high idle issue we got to figure out. I'm not sure if they're related. They could be. So let's throw it all back together, throw the carb back in the bike. We can also bench sink the carbs while we have it all apart. If you watch the Honda Rebel videos, you remember me complaining justifiably that it was a pain to work on that carb to get it in and out for 250. What do we think about the Honda 250 carb placement design?
Bad.
Yes, very bad.
Not good.
But this is like the king of inconvenient carbs. For these to even go in and slide in the bike, these two, top of the carbs have to come off, and then I forgot what this is called, but that also has to come off, which has O-rings. So you just got to be careful, nothing's missing. And then you slide it in, and then you put it all back together through the top of the bike. And then to do all that just to see if it might run or it might not run. I don't know. We'll give it a try. All right, I'm going to put the front wheel back on. Chelsea did an amazing job on this front fender. Looks brand new. So let's see if we can squeeze this wheel under there. So let's button that up, and we'll move on to putting that 7-volt regulator in, and then we'll get the carbs in. With the help of my lovely assistant behind the camera, I got this carb in record time. We're going to try to start it, and I'm going to be watching to make sure the fuel doesn't come up through the intake manifold again. That's what I'm watching for now. And then if that works, we'll have to figure out why we're getting that high 3,000 RPM idle. So let's give it a go. It's doing that thing again where it's only running with the start engaged. Let me mess with these. I think something's coming loose with the electronics under there. At the moment, I don't see any fuel gushing out, so I think we did fix that problem. I didn't really see anything. I pressed everything together and I tightened the ignition coils loose on the frame. If this keeps happening, I'm going to tear everything apart and figure out what the issue is. So let's try to sync those carbs, get the idle a little higher. That was on choke. The issue with the high idle might have been that fuel. It's not leaking anymore, and the idle's low. Heck yeah, man, excited. Gonna be riding this today.
Whoa, riding.
One thing I noticed working on this before was the fan was never coming on, and I checked it and the fan's unplugged. I'm gonna take the horn assembly off, plug it in. Also, I was thinking that we need to let the bike warm up before we sync the carb. So what I'll do is I'll adjust the idle screw to give it that more RPM, that higher RPM, and let it warm up for 10 minutes, let the fan kick on, and then we can sync the carbs. So that's the plan.
You're gonna watch me do this?
No. I can spin the fan by hand so I know the motor's not seized. I don't know why it was unplugged, but we're gonna plug it back in and see if it turns on. Doesn't want to idle anymore. Off camera a couple days ago I did check compression, but I got about 130 on each cylinder, which brand new I think they're 175 and good is like 160. But again, this has been sitting for at least 5 years, and when you're checking compression like that, you're really looking for all the cylinders are roughly the same pressure. Now if one was 90 and the rest are 130, that's something that I would have to address. But just because it's been sitting for so long, I think 130 is fine. You know, we'll run it for a couple months and check again. What usually happens is the rings on the pistons get stuck when it sits. So it allows that blow by. But once you run it some more, hopefully the rings get unstuck, and then hopefully that issue fixes itself. Again, 130 is not terrible. It'll run. It'll be fine. But yeah, just thought I'd let you know.
Thanks for the info.
You're welcome. So yesterday, very anticlimactic. Right when we put everything back together to see if it was going to idle and run, our battery it died. It didn't have enough juice. So it's the next day. We charged the battery, and yesterday before you left, I ended up putting in that 7-volt regulator to replace the old one, and now we do have a working fuel gauge. Doing that electrical thing again. I just had my screwdriver. Oh, I'm sitting on it. Try that. That's with the choke on. We'll let it warm up so we can sync those carburetors. while it's running, we'll also make sure the fan kicks on and the temperature gauge starts to work. Sounds great. All right, so just when I thought we were making some dang progress on this bike, it's only running on these 2 cylinders, and now I'm questioning myself, was it ever running on all 4 cylinders? We did test compression, like I said, so I know compression's not an issue. I did just check spark, and we're getting spark, so it has to be a fuel issue. I can spray starting fluid down in there, and these fire. So from somehow getting too much fuel to not enough fuel, so I either didn't adjust the floats properly, or there's a blockage in like the galley that transfers the fuel from this side of the carbs to this side, because I've got no fuel in the carbs. So I'm gonna take it all back out again and see where I messed up. What do you think about that, Chelsea?
I think I'm glad I'm here to help you.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so this is where we're at. I can throw compressed air into the fuel inlet, and we get air coming out of both the right carbs and the passages. Where our stoppage is from here to these. This is like gaslighting me, because I swear this carb was overfilling with gas yesterday. So now that these are both clogged, I'm losing my mind here. So we're going to disassemble both carbs from the intake plenum gasket side, and then see where the stoppage is. That's my life. So I think what happened is, I'm an idiot, but you don't tune into this channel for expert advice, all right? Tune in for the entertainment and comedy and watching an idiot try to fix a bike. I guess I just adjusted these floats wrong. I'm not sure how I did that, but we adjusted them again. They sit at 21 millimeters off the bowl, and now I can send air through it while they're hanging and verify fuel's going to be coming in, and then I can manually close them and verify fuel is going to stop when the float hits the right level. So that was totally my fault. So let's put this all back together and see if we can get all 4 cylinders running. All my troubles in life are typically caused by past decisions, and today is no different. So I think this is the 3rd or 4th time I'm putting this in, but we're confident now, aren't we?
Yes.
We're confident. We're gonna have all 4 cylinders. We're gonna have a low idle. Well, man, I don't know. Maybe that high idle was from this side running and something was wrong in there. So maybe we'll be taken out for the 5th time. And then I will just sell the bike and not worry about it. Showtime for the 20th time. These are tough because they're not gravity fed carbs, so the vacuum has to suck all the fuel and fill the carbs. So let's see how long it takes to do that. I had that idle adjusted way high last time. Let me bring it down. Since we have all carbs running, hopefully. I think it's about time we can actually take this for the first test drive, and I'm so excited. There's still a lot to do on it, but let's just see how it rides up and down the street. Neutral. enough for the wheels. I can barely even move it. But it's running great. First time I've ridden it since I bought it. That's the first time it's ran in at least 5 to 6 years. There's definitely a lot of other issues we need to work out. Thanks for coming on this journey, and thanks for watching. Thanks for watching is what I would say if I was about to give up without a proper test drive, which I almost did. But you, the viewer, deserve more than that. So I went back to the shed, rebuilt the rear master cylinder, took apart all the calipers, rebuilt them too, threw some new paint on, realized it looked like trash, so I disassembled them and took them to go get powder coated, reassembled them with new seals and pads, had a buddy make me a new hydraulic hose for the rear caliper, slapped them all back together, and went for a real test drive. Thanks for watching.